Welcome to today's webinar, which is on CV writing tips for senior executives. My name is Phil Scott, MD at Exec Recruit Group, which encompasses FD Recruit, HR Recruit and Accountancy Recruit. I've been recruiting for about 20 years and I'm delighted to have a co-host with me who is Tracy Warren. She's got 30 years experience working within finance and recruiting into large finance teams. And then over the last few years, she founded a business called Primaris, which focuses on CV writing and interview coaching. And Tracy's experience and accolades, she has accounting qualifications, and then she did the Prince 2 project management qualification, and very recently has been shortlisted for various awards. One of them was a coach and mentor of the year. So got a lot of experience, got two different perspectives. Obviously from my side, we send the CV to clients and we see what happens to the CV and take a lot of feedback on CVs from the client side. From Tracy's side, she's sat on the other side of the fence and has accumulated a lot of experience of reading CVs over the years and has experience of what she thinks looks good and stands out. And then latterly, she's been working as a professional coach, advising quite a lot of senior executives. So how the session's going to run, we're going to just talk for the first part about the CV itself, but we have got a Q&A opportunity at the end where the viewers and listeners can submit their questions. So what I'd like you to do is, if you do want to submit a question, if you can pop it into the chat box, and once we've run through the CV advice, we'll actually look at individual questions. So I'd just like to pass over to Tracy, and Tracy, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what's happening in your world at the minute. It's obviously different times. We've sort of had lockdown that's starting to ease, but just talk to me, what's life like for you at the minute?
Yes, quite different. So I've doing a lot of CVs at the moment, obviously. Sort of on a one-woman mission to get everyone a job, which is quite challenging at the moment. I'm also doing business coaching online, so I've moved my interview coaching and my business coaching online now, so using virtual whiteboards, which has been really good. Gone down really well with clients actually. Obviously working fully from home at the moment, not going out to see clients, but it's quite nice to spend time with the chickens and collect the fresh eggs every day. So they're enjoying having them all at home.
Great, thank you. And so how and why did you get into CV coaching and interview coaching? What happened there? Obviously you're working in finance, so tell me a little bit about that.
Well, the last sort of 20 years of my corporate career, I recruited and built really good teams. And I really sort of got into the mentoring and the coaching and the team development and bringing individuals on. So as part of that, obviously I've seen thousands of CVs, interviewed hundreds of people. So I started for colleagues and friends, helping them with their CVs to find jobs. So it sort of naturally progressed into being part of my business. And especially now it's taken off in quite a big way because obviously the current situation.
Thanks, Tracy. So what I'll do is I'll just share my screen. So for the purpose of this session, we're going to be talking about the CV in the following format. Hopefully that comes up there. So we will break down the individual parts. We've got a template CV that we're using for the purposes of illustration. So we'll start it shortly just talking about the personal details that you include at the top, then moves into a professional summary. Below that, we've got the skills and expertise section, your key achievements, and then we go into the work history part of it, the professional experience, and at the latter part is your education and your training. So I won't have that on screen because we'll obviously run through those parts, so I'll just stop sharing there. So if we start at the top with the personal details, Tracy, just tell me what you normally advise to be included in the personal details section without sort of you know, everything and taking up too much space.
Yes. So what we normally have is name, obviously. Sometimes if the client's happy with that, we have the letters after the name. It's sort of good to get those in there as the professional credential. And then I don't put the full address on normally. I sort of put the location. So it might be Newcastle upon Tyne, or it might be somewhere in then Derbyshire, just to give an idea of where the person is. But then if they're available internationally or nationally, I may even say that afterwards, so they're not sort of restricted to location. Obviously your phone number, your email address, sometimes your LinkedIn profile, and also some of my clients have run their own businesses and still working those part-time, so I include the website address for those as well. Underneath the name, what I like to do is have a short descriptor. So one of my clients recently called himself a professional company director. Now, I didn't think that was going to help him when he was promoting his CV to potential employers, because it didn't really describe what he did. So after a conversation with him, it came to light that it was really into sort of business improvement, putting in place management systems and processes and helping to scale businesses. So instead of professional company director, I called him business growth and improvement specialist. So it's not necessarily about the job that you're doing now or the job you've been doing. It's looking to what you actually want to do and what you can bring to the company that you're applying to.
Yeah, great. I've seen that quite a bit. I think we were talking about it yesterday, where about job titles need to describe what they do rather than what that business would call that person, in case it's not in layman's terms. So below the sort of personal information, you encourage this sort of the next part to be a summary. Could you talk to me about that? Is that a sort of personal profile section?
Yes, it is, yeah. So normally I tend to have them about sort of 6 to 8 lines long in a slightly bigger font than the rest of the CV, so they stand out a bit more, because that's the place where the recruiter's eyes will naturally go to start with. And here it's it's the essence of you. So it's your key achievements, sort of just in summary, a little bit about your skills, bringing in maybe technical skills, but also things like leadership and professional skills, but just the key things. And sort of giving an idea of you and your motivations. So for me, it's about what I try and get through all of my CVs is what's different about you. Why should the recruiter pick you? What do you bring that somebody else doesn't? So I really, when I write a profile statement, really try and summarise the essence of the person and the motivations, and sort of show what value they can add to the company they're applying to.
Okay, and that is a difficult section to fill out, I think, and make yourself stand out. I mean, as a business, we see hundreds, thousands of CVs, and I don't know if 90% of them have been copied off the same website. So it's one of those things I do think you need to evolve. I'm sure you do, and I'm guessing you ask the people you work with in terms of their CVs to do it themselves, and then you can come at it with a fresh perspective and maybe just really make it stand out.
Yeah, normally sort of look at what they've done, but only take really important elements from it. So what the top tip for you when you're looking at your CV, if you're rewriting it yourself, start at the bottom. So go back to your very original role, obviously take out any irrelevant detail that you don't need in there anymore, but work your way through it sort of in reverse chronological order, because when I do a CV, that's the way I do it, and by the time I get to the current role, I feel like I've really got a good understanding of who the person is, because I've sort of followed their progression through their career. So it's a bit like writing a business case or something. You always do the exact summary last when you've done all the work on the document. So it's a little bit like that.
Okay, thank you. And you sort of mentioned the skills and experience part, and in that example that we were using there, it's in a separate area. What would you have a bit for a profile and skills section, or how would you advise?
Normally, and what I try and do as well is split the skills between technical skills. Sometimes I'll have a sector, section. So if I work with an engineering client, they might work in oil and gas, or some of the industry that are really important they want to stay in. And then also adding in professional and personal skills. And I try and make them really relevant to the person. So we're all a good communicator. Everyone's got a good communicator on their CV. But having gone through the whole CV and doing the skills sort of towards the end, I think, right, what does good communicator really mean? And it could be something like able to work collaboratively at all levels, or it could be able to mediate and influence from the shop floor to the board. So I try and give a bit of context to the skill rather than just say, I'm a good communicator, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and that is the generic ones that you do see, good communicator. And I think the personal favourite is able to work independently and or as part of a team. That's, I'm not sure which website that's on, but it's well used out there. So yeah, I do agree if you can expand on that and make it specific to what good communication looks like in the context of hiring you, then it's very important. So just moving on to the achievement section that you've got in terms of a summary, and then we do cover achievements as part of each job role. Just talk to me about the achievement section, and I'll just flash back on the template we're using just as a recap. So we talked about the personal details at the top, professional summary, and then the skills and expertise. But just talk to me about the key achievements part before we move into the actual career history section.
Yes. Certainly no more than 5. Some of the exec level CVs I do have 4 or 5, but then generally I find there's 2 or 3. But again, this what I normally do is have a call with the client and say, describe to me what you did, because I can then dig into a bit around the outcomes. Because another thing to keep asking yourself throughout your CV process is, what was the outcome, the so what? So I've got an example here from a CV I did last week, actually. So the original achievement said I reduced costs. So I said, by how much? 30k. Well, so what? There was more money available for the GPs to spend on their project. So what? It enabled them to make changes to how they work. So what? There was more time for patient care. Now we're getting there, but so what? So this led to improved patient outcomes and reduced mortality. So that's brilliant. Less people died, which is a fantastic outcome. But it's about it's a bit like the 5 whys in coaching. You keep asking, so what, so what, so what, until you get to the real outcome at the end and what it actually meant for the business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And most of the people watching this are in finance or HR. So I think those 2 particular disciplines, that and maybe sales, is really where you can quantify your achievements. Certainly in finance, you sat next to the numbers and how it's made a difference to the organisation. So yeah, I'm a great believer in that. So just moving on then to the experience section. So the career summary. How do you advise that structured? And I know we've got achievements within that, and we'll talk about that again in a second. But just talk to me about how you would structure your career history, because from my experience, that's the bit that most employers are interested in, unless you're hiring a graduate. It is the experience that you're purchasing when taking somebody on. So just give me an overview on that.
Yeah, so normally, obviously depending on the CV, I try and put the job title first in bold. I do see some CVs where the date is really bold or the company is really bold. So it can be important having experience in a certain company or sector, but generally I try and put the role first and then the employer underneath it with the dates. What I like to do then is have a line or 2 just describing what they were doing there. So not a responsibilities list as such, but maybe sometimes in engineering, I will put in what the company did, because they can get quite specific around what sector experience people need. But So I just have a line or two around, this is sort of what I did. And then I go into more of the achievements. So the bullet point achievements below there, really punchy. I don't tend to sort of write longhand and say, when I was there, I did it. I might just put achieved X number of sales over whatever time period, or improved X, Y, Z. So I make it really punchy, the achievement section.
Okay, fine. I definitely just coming back to something you've said, and I know this makes a difference from a recruitment side, is the narrative about what the company does, and in finance, the turnover, in HR, the headcount, anything you can do there, you know, private equity backed, or you know, overseas, you know, US owned, or whatever it may be, because quite often in a competitive market, that's the sort of thing that is important to the hirer. Is, you know, have they got someone who's actually worked in similar environments of a similar size, similar structure, reporting structure. Now, a lot of FDs have asked me in the past, is, yeah, but that might exclude me if I'm going for, you know, for a role in a different, but if you don't put it in, you'll be in the maybe pile. And quite frankly, the maybe pile very rarely gets visited in a competitive market if they've already filled, you know, if they've already got 5, 6, 7, 8 CVs in the yes pile, they're the ones that get the interviews. So you're better off being off the fence and either in the yes or the no pile than always making the maybe pile. Have you got any thoughts on that? Would you sort of concur?
Definitely. If you've got a big corporate background and you may be applying to a smaller SME type company, I would word it around, you know, I'm bringing all this amazing experience that I can use in your business. So it's sort of having different experiences, it's sort of dealing with a big environment and all of the skills and qualities that requires, and you can sort of bring added value to a different company by doing that.
Yeah, good. Okay, and the achievements part, then we sort of mentioned that, and the duties bit. I mean, from personal experience, more importantly for junior roles, I think the duties can be important. You don't want to sort of duplicate, but at the same time, I think we were talking about it yesterday, Tracy, when we had a conversation offline about just sometimes you've got to think of the lowest common denominator of person that's reading that CV. So your CV might go either direct to a company, and it could go to a very junior recruiter who you know, for FDs or for, you know, for anything HR. That might be the first time they've ever been asked to sort of, you know, by maybe the business owner or the chief exec to look at CVs in that discipline. So what they've got here is a job specification, and they're looking for a CV that's a good match. And unfortunately, if they're not a professional, they're just going to be doing a keyword match. So sometimes you do have to put a bit more in the duties section that you would like. Obviously, when it goes to the CEO, I tend to find that they're interested in the achievements part, but you've got to, I do agree, you have to have both and separate them out so that whoever you are, you can look at the relevant bit. So if you're just keyword matching as a sort of CV sifter at the client side, a PA or something like that who might be doing it on behalf of the end decision maker, they'll look at the duties, and then obviously the key stakeholders are going to look at the achievements. Is that how you sort of found things?
Yes, I don't like jargon, don't like buzzwords and things like that, and 3-letter acronyms that no one knows what they are. So I like plain English. And I've got an example actually from a CV that I did a couple of weeks ago, where the original said, full understanding of gross margin protection through costing to clients' aspirations and policy. And I thought, what does that mean? So if I don't understand it, a potential employer isn't going to understand it. So after talking to the client, that turned into maximised gross profit margins through expert ability to balance client expectations against the most cost-effective technical solution. So changing that sentence to clearer English, but also bringing in lots of skills as well and showing how they add value. So yeah.
Yeah, that's something that we had as a potential question that may come in is the acronyms and the jargon. You've got to just bear in mind that the layperson could be the first obstacle you've got to get over as well. So yeah, and I mean, we also one of the things that we'd mentioned is job titles as well. How do you think? So when you're actually putting a job title down, so do you try and translate that into the sort of UK equivalent if it's a UK role? Because if you work for a global company, they could call a finance director a VP of finance, for example, but the person reading it might not know what a VP of finance is. What's your thoughts generally on job titles?
Yeah, I like that type of worked in the oil and gas industry, so it was very, very jargony. So where I could, so in a couple of places, they got the role, but then you could put in brackets what that actually means if the client really wants to keep the role. It might be specifically industry. But if they're applying to different industries, it might be a different thing. So I try and describe what it is if the client's happy to sort of have two titles, but also in the line underneath the job title to explain what it is as well. And then to reiterate that, talk about it in the profile statement, but not call it the jargon name. So describe what it actually was.
Yeah, I agree. It's you have to translate it, and I've seen so many CVs that struggle to get interviews because they just presumed that they had to use the official job title and thought it was legally incorrect to change that. But it is a description of your experience. You can obviously explain it into you, can't you, that what the official job title was, ahead of any references. So. And then the achievements, you talked about quantifying, and that's something that a lot of CVs don't do. And in finance, we've run training sessions over the years, and I remember one about 10 years ago, and it was a finance one, and they'd reduced debtor days in this business by about 14 days. Which could be amazing, or it could mean not a lot depending on the size of the business. But as it turned out, and we actually followed that through, just like you said about the so what, it meant that the 14 days in that business, it must have been 24, 25, 26 million turnover, but that made a difference of reducing the overdraft by £1 million. And at the time, the interest rates they were paying were 7 or 8%, so that's a 70, 80 grand saving just on that position. It was actually a credit controller that was mentioning it, and she was only paid, I think, 19,000-20,000 at the time. So she'd obviously paid her salary back 3.5 times just on that one achievement, and actually quantifying that in terms of the pounds and pence saved the business, recurring bank fees of 80 grand per year is it's a no-brainer really in terms of quantifying that achievement. So it is important, and I know that's something that you think you ask people to to give you their CV, and then you can work through that with them and pull that out and tease that out, because it's not always obvious. I mean, when you put a CV together, you're going to get 80-90% right, but you do need that fresh pair of eyes to help you with that. So just on anything else that you'd like to add on the sort of career history part, anything?
Be careful about copy and pasting a job description. So that's okay to a point, but think about relevance. Don't put every single any other duties in there. Think about relevance, keep it short and snappy, and put the key points in. So especially sort of for your older roles, you might want to start taking things out so that you can fit more in for your current experience, your last couple of jobs. But yeah, and think about what you've achieved in those tasks rather than just a generic list of open post. So again, it's the so what element. So keep asking yourself, so what?
Yeah, it is a tricky one as well, because I've advised people to sort of paste the job specification in, but not literally, because that would take away the context of half of the duties that you're going to delete. But I think it is important to, like you say, tailor it and make sure that you're addressing the key points, you know, of a particular advertisement. So
I've seen CVs that are 5 pages long, and most of it is lists from a job description. So obviously that can be pared down quite a lot into the more relevant points. And obviously the shorter it is, the more that the really relevant things stand out.
Yeah, and we'll talk about length. One of the questions that's come through is about the length of the CV, so we'll cover that shortly in the relevance. So then at the bottom of the document, you say education and training. What's your sort of thoughts on that part?
Yep. So if you did your GCSEs 20, 30 years ago, don't list every single subject. No one cares. In fact, no one probably cares that you've done GCSEs, but that long ago. Obviously, if you've done a degree, that's quite useful. If you've got professional qualifications, they're quite useful. But again, don't just put a list of everything you've ever done. Think about relevance. Think about what's going to set you apart from the other candidates. So be a bit selective about what you add in. Less is more sometimes.
What about letters after your name in the personal part at the top? I know for say accounting or HR roles where they've got to be CIPD or they've got to be a certain qualification, that can put someone into the potential pile straight away. Do you say to anyone letters after your name or not?
Yes, some people don't like it. I think because it may be a British thing. We don't want to sing about our achievements, but some people do like it. So it's personal preference. I think it probably should be in there on balance because you've earned those qualifications, and especially if you're going for a job in that field, it shows you sort of credibility.
Yeah, I think in finance a lot of people do put ACMA or FCA or whatever the the sort of latest qualification is, and it does if it is a qualified position, then it will put them in the right direction. So and one of the questions that's actually come in and came in beforehand is cover letter. Any thoughts on cover letters? You can ask 10 people and get 10 different views, so the viewers will have to make their own mind up on this. But what's your thoughts on cover letters?
It's an art in itself, writing a cover letter. So the aim is not just to regurgitate the CV. There's no point in that, but it's about picking out elements of the CV and sort of introducing your key achievements again, but not in a list, sort of giving a bit of context. But then also, because a cover letter is personal usually, make it relevant to the recruiter or the employer, make it relevant to the job. So tell them that you know what their company goals are, so sort of relate your experience to those. So for example, I bring my my inclusive leadership and ability to improve systems and processes, which will help XYZ company to achieve your goals of expanding globally or what is. So it's about making it a bit more personal to the employer, and you can tweak those then for each role you apply for. Probably no more than a page, because people haven't got time to read reams and reams of stuff, because they should have most of the information now in the CV. But it's about relating how your experience and skills apply to the job that you're applying for, as well as the company. And maybe thinking a bit about the values of the company, the culture of the company, and showing that you're a good fit.
Thank you. One of the experiences I've had on cover letters, and I've asked a lot of hiring managers, and I'd probably say 50% of them won't read the cover letter. They go straight into the career history. So, but 50% do. So it is a damned if you do, damned if you don't. But what I would say is, for the 50% that don't read a cover letter, if there's anything particular that you want them to see, then make sure it is also in the CV as well. Because I know some people have, the feedback I've got is they've said, oh, well, I'd written that in the cover letter. Unfortunately, it went to the hiring manager that was a a person that doesn't read the cover letter, then they've missed that one. So you do have to box clever a little bit, I think, on the CV and cover letter blend.
Added value, so it's the extra nuances that you can't include in the CV that make it personal to that employer.
Absolutely. So one of the other questions is length of CV. What's your thoughts on the length of CV?
This is an age-old debate, isn't it? I try and get them to 2 pages. With an exec CV or a senior manager, it sometimes just trickles onto 3. So I think, in my experience, 3 is okay. I wouldn't want to go to 4 because I think then you've got too much content and it's just not going to be read and it's going to be lost and missed. So yeah, try and keep it to 2, no more than 3.
I would agree that it's relevancy determines the length of the CV. When you get to senior exec level, then your career may be 10, 20, 30 years, whatever it may be. So there's a lot more to put in, and like you alluded to, you can shorten the earlier experience. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is, well, what happens if you're an interim or you're in portfolio work? You may go on to more pages, but you can sometimes have a long and short version as well. That if you've got key recruiters, you can give them the long version and they can, with your guidance, can pull things out that's relevant to a particular role. If you've done 20 interim assignments over the last 10 or 15 years, then a couple of the assignments that could be 5 years ago could be key to that. So I think it's I think the document that goes across needs to be 3-ish, 2-3 pages, probably with inserts from the larger document for a particular role. That's how we've done it on an assignment basis. So, but it is like you say, this is an age-old debate, and I think you've just got to apply your own common sense to it and not take out anything that's that's key. So just going through a few more of the questions that we've got here. When you're doing the main body of the CV, the duties and responsibilities, bullet point or paragraph? What's your preference?
Definitely bullet point. So like I explained, maybe a sentence or 2 at the top as an introduction, bit of context, and maybe a few responsibilities in there, and then move into bullet points. So paragraphs, the detail just gets lost in there. So make it punchy with bullet points. It's a lot easier to read.
Okay, and a question that's come in that's related to that. How many lines should the duties section and achievements section be?
Now, that depends on lots of things. So the role you're applying for, the number of jobs you've had, the experience you've got, and what's relevant. So there's no answer to that one. It really depends on the individual. So when I do a CV, when I've gone through the whole thing, I then go back and think, right, is that relevant? Because sometimes you get repetition in CVs, so I will try and cut that out where I can. If someone's done 3 jobs and they're all the same job, I might try and pare that down a bit and sort of describe it a bit better in the first line or 2, rather than just let you list everything in every job.
Yeah, I mean, I from reading lots of CVs, I think personally, if the current role has got a dozen sort of bullet points on duties and 4 or 5 on achievements, I wouldn't be falling off my chair thinking what an awful CV. But if their 10th job ago, when they trained in accounting in 1970 as an articles clerk, then having 12 bullet points for that bit, obviously not needed. So I always say steal from the stuff that was ages ago and give that space to the most recent stuff. But and again with achievement.
So every time you add a new role to your CV as well, go back to the very bottom and think, right, what's relevant now, and see if you can squidge the earlier ones down a bit.
Yeah, and I think job titles are enough for the stuff you've done
Yeah.
donkeys years ago. I think that's fine.
Especially where people know what they are. So if you're in finance and you're in practice and you're an account senior or an audit junior or whatever, people sort of know what that is if you're looking for jobs within that sector. So you don't need loads of bullet points about what you're actually doing.
Okay.
If it was a long time ago.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the questions I think we've covered was how long the cover letter should be. You said no more than a page. That's that one covered. And what about if you're applying for a particular job? I think we know the answer to this, but in terms of, would you reorder your bullet points and make sure that the things that you know about that job are at the top? In terms of just reshuffling if you've got a dozen bullet points of your responsibilities and 5 bullet points for your achievements, I'm guessing it's common sense to make sure that the key deliverables rise to the top.
It is. Yeah. You can always tweak the profile statement at the top as well to make it a bit more specific to that role. When I do a CV, generally, I look at the achievements and things like that and reorder them so that we've got sort of high impact ones towards the top. But obviously, if something's really specific to a particular role, you could put that at the top instead. So,
yeah, super. Okay, and in terms of the experience, do you do your most recent stuff at the top and your older stuff at the bottom? I know some CVs that come through are in the reverse order. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I've seen CVs that start with GCSEs from 30 years ago, right at the top. So no, move them out of the way. And I've also seen CVs that start with "I'm married with 4 kids." Well, no, irrelevant. Move it. What I want to see at the top is profile statement, skills, achievements, and then the latest role, and then going backwards in chronological order. However, there is an exception to that, and that's when you're changing career. So your last but one role may be really relevant, so you might want to think about switching those around. But what I try and do, because when I was a recruiter, if I saw something that was out of order, I found it quite confusing. It was just sort of extra brain power and time to think, well, what were you doing, and why doesn't that tally with that, and is there a gap? And so it just wasted time. So what I try and do is bring out in the personal statement, if you're changing career, talk about your background, your skills, and your key achievements, your motivations, and then say, I'm now looking for a role in XYZ because for whatever reason. So I did have a client not long ago who was moving from sort of admin, senior level admin, trying to get into HR, having done the CIPD qualification. So I was trying to bring out what she'd done in relation to HR within the admin role. And saying I'm now looking for a role where I can utilise my HR experience and my qualification, just to explain to the employer why you're changing.
Yeah, no, makes total sense. There's another couple of questions come through. I can answer one of those. Most jobs are in London. I live in Yorkshire, but work on a weekly commute basis. I've been advised to put a friend's London address on my CV to get shortlisted. How can I convince London recruitment agencies that I should be considered? Yeah, not a bad piece of advice, to be honest. A lot of CVs we get might say London and Yorkshire on them, or you might have address like that. And I would say that some of the vacancies that are handled may stipulate we want someone who lives in a commutable distance. If they've had a bad experience with either a relocator or someone working from home getting homesick Monday to Friday, they may ignore that. So if you have got an alternative address for an alternative location, then why not put it on? I'm not telling you to do it. I'm just saying, why not? So down to personal preference. But I do know that a lot of tech and CRM systems will do it, to cut down from thousands of UK-wide candidates, you may do a radius search. I know we've got the facility at our place, and I'm pretty sure that's the same with all other recruitment businesses. So certain recruiters will choose to use that radius search. So it's something that you may may or may not want to use. I'll leave that to personal preference. Another question: to what degree would you exhaustively explain the relevance and applicability of international experience? This person has got experience from Australia, yeah, I would. It depends again on the role. Sometimes they want relevant UK experience. Sometimes international experience is going to be a massive plus point. If they've got a subsidiary or in Australia, then that's going to be a plus point. So it's horses for courses, really. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. You will, it's a positive if you explain you've got the experience from there. But talk to us individually if you've got any particular questions that we may not have answered around that. So just coming on to one of the questions: how do you present promotions, i.e. accountant to finance manager to senior finance manager, possibly beyond? How would you try and present that, Tracy, in a CV where you've worked at the same company?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of an example. I've done a couple like this recently, actually. So one of them had sort of roll there with the company name at the top. So I added in a line that said, due to my success in the position, I was promoted to this and then this. So I've got it in there as a promotion, because I think that's a great thing. I did another one as well where he didn't have the roles listed individually on his CV to start with, but he got sort of hidden in the text that he'd progressed within that firm. So again, I took it out of the sort of small text at the bottom and I put it in the line underneath the job role, the job role that he did at the final point when he left that company. And again, I put something around, whilst I started I think it was on the sales counter, my ability to deal with customer complaints or whatever it was soon led to my promotion to this and then my promotion to this. So I like to mention it as a thing, because I think it's really good. If you've been promoted, then you're doing something right.
Yeah, and I suppose it depends how obvious it is as well. But if you've got dates next to each of the, if you've got at the top the company name and then the various dates. So just to chip in, I would say if you'd only ever worked for one company, which maybe this person has, then I would put them as separate positions. But it's obvious that it's the same company that you've got promoted with dates, and that will broaden out the experience, really. Whereas if you condense it too much and that's your only ever employer, then apologies, I should have silenced that phone. Hopefully that'll go off. Live TV for you, that. Yeah, so I would say to broaden out the experience, then definitely maybe make it as though it's almost like separate positions and with the separate duties that go underneath that. Yeah. One of the other questions has come through. How do you deal with a gap in your CV, and a gap in the work history? If the particular bit on the end of this is if you've been in between roles. What's your thoughts on that, Tracy?
I like to explain it. Because then again, you're anticipating what the potential employer might think. So if he's got 10 great CVs in front of him, one's got unexplained gaps, that may be the one that he doesn't look at. It may be. So make it easy for the employer or the recruiter, and explain what you were doing. So if you were looking for work, were you doing any training courses while you were out of work? Were you doing volunteering or anything like that? So do explain it. I think honesty and openness is the way forward, but make it sound positive if you can do. So what were you doing in that time? Can you put a positive spin on it, whilst being truthful, obviously?
I'd agree. You don't want it to make the perception that you're unemployable or that you've just been twiddling your thumbs, because if you are supposed to be committed to your career, then it does need explaining. So okay, one of the other questions is about hobbies and interests. What's your thoughts on including hobbies or interests? Do you include them? Don't you include them?
I see so many people's CVs where they say, I go to the gym and I read books, which is what everybody does. So, as I said earlier, think about what's going to differentiate you from the candidates, and don't waste space and ink on something that everybody else does. Now, if you've done some fantastic volunteering work, so I know I had a guy who volunteered for the Scouts, and sort of got lots of skills from that, sort of dealing with the public and people and sort of leadership skills. That was great. So if it's relevant, put it in. If you've done an amazing charity thing, like you've walked the Great Wall of China, that may be relevant, so put that in. But generally, I don't include hobbies and interests.
Yeah, I would agree with you, unless it's something that's amazing out of the ordinary that's going to put you out as a standout candidate. Then the sort of reading, watching TV, socialising with friends, hopefully most people do, unless we've got social distancing, and you can't do that, of course. So just moving on to the next one. What about CVs that are written in the third person? I'm only laughing because we talked about this before. So
yeah. What I would say is, it's your career, you've earned it, you've worked for it, own your achievements. So it's I all the way for me.
Absolutely.
You're talking about yourself. Be positive, be confident.
Yeah, no, certainly. And another question that's come in, would you include references? And I'm guessing they don't just mean names of references, I mean the actual reference itself. Have you ever had them submitted with CVs or part of the CV?
Yeah, I tend not to include references on the CVs I do, because again, any employer worth their salt are going to take up references anyway, so it's sort of a given. So I sort of don't see the point in taking up space with the reference details or references available on request, when you could use that space to add in another achievement.
Yeah, I have seen there as a separate document where, almost like if you think of the LinkedIn references that you can ask, or recommendations as they are, then I have seen that, and they have worked and made a candidate stand out, but it was a separate document. I mean, you don't want to work, like say, clog up the 2, 3, 4 page CV with 3 pages of references. So it can be done. One thing that you do have to be aware of is that you have to have the permission of the referee to send that on. So I know as an agency, if we get a reference, we can't send that on to the end client unless we've told the original referee that's where it's ending up. If they've just given it for our purposes, that's where it has to stay. So if you do broadcast anything, just be aware that you've got to really have permission for that. I think that's pretty much most of the questions come through there, Tracy. So quite a few come through on the chat box. So from here, I think we discussed beforehand. I mean, this session is really for those that want to self-service and write their own CV. And we always advise anyway that people would, it's their work, it's their career history to write their CV themselves, and then get a fresh pair of eyes and ears, not just for typos, but for, does it sell you? Do your achievements stand out? Are they achievements that are not just run of the mill, or are they achievements that seem to be pretty record breaking? So that fresh pair of eyes and ears can obviously be you, Tracy, I'm guessing, and that's what you do as a living. If anyone wanted to reach out to you, then I'm guessing you're okay with that. If anyone does want to get in touch, what's the best way of getting for them to get in touch with you, Tracy?
Either by LinkedIn, so I can be found under Tracy Warren, or probably by email possibly my website. So it's primaris.co.uk.
And Tracy's website, I've had a look at it. There's quite a few sort of templates, and there's quite a few. There's a good resources section there as well, which you know, after this session, if you've forgotten everything we've told you, then you can go to the Primaris. It's .co.uk. Is that right, Tracy? Yeah. You can go to Tracy's website, and it's got you know, some good tips and advice, and obviously Tracy's details. From our side, I know a lot of people do ask us for sort of CV advice, and this is why we've done this session, is to try and give on a group basis, group audience, as much advice as we can, because on an individual basis, really what you don't want us to do is become CV advisors, because you want us to actually uncover jobs so that we can, you know, for the people that are registered, we're actually putting jobs to you, not just spending all day doing CV advice. So that's where someone like Tracy will really, really help anyone who's looking. That's what you do as a living, and we are professional job finders, I suppose, as a living as well. So we've got another session next week for those that are interested, which is on competency-based interviewing. So we've got another speaker. I know Tracy does interview coaching as well, and we've got another speaker called Chris Reynolds, who is going to be talking about how to tackle a competency-based interview for anyone. So you'll find details of that on the FD Recruit website, or reach out to any of the recruiters and they'll send you the link should you be wishing to watch that session. But thanks a lot, Tracy, for sparing us the time and imparting your knowledge. And yeah, I'll hopefully we'll do this one again in the future. But thanks everyone for listening, and I'd like to formally bring the session to a close. Thank you.